Thanks for listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. 1 hour of tips from experts and real stories from people just like you. For those thinking about what lies ahead, for those going through the job search, and those who have paved the way to their next career after the military. These professionals are dedicated to helping you move forward successfully to the next phase of your career after the military. Welcome to Exchange.
Hello and welcome back. Today I am honored to speak to somebody who is truly going through the soup. I have Jose Jimenez. Jose, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for telling us your story. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great, Cheryl. Thanks for having me.
You and I have talked, and we are part of an organization that does help people transition from military to civilian careers. And I applaud you for what you're doing ahead of your transition. But since you are actively in your transition, why don't you share a bit of your story and where you're at?
Well, a little bit of my transition story, I will tell you, began about a year and a half ago when you get this spidey senses telling you that maybe it's time to start considering a new career. And when that occurred, I very quickly began to reach out to those who have been through this process, both peers and mentors, as well as those who are there to support us, just to kind of understand what that roadmap looks like, what the timeline looks like. And over the 14 months or so, I've learned very quickly that it takes more than 14 months. Well, from a standpoint administratively, right, as you can imagine, the government gives you a lot of paperwork. And also from the standpoint mentally, you have to mentally prepare for the things that are coming. And then professionally from the standpoint, okay, well, how do I define myself in a suit and tie? And then never forgetting that when you lead a family, right, you also have to account for the same elements at the home level. So needless to say, there's a lot to be learned still. I think I've made some progress, but you can never stop learning anyway, period. So looking forward to the next few months I have left to really cross the finish line and see what's on the other side.
You also have perspectives from the folks that you're leading and who are going through this process. Please tell us a little bit about what you've learned about those folks who have left, not only your battalion or your command, but some of the takeaways that you have from those folks.
Well, what I've learned first and foremost, and we like to say this often and I'll repeat it, is we have very resilient and flexible men and women in uniform and their families, meaning you just have to give them the guidance. You have to point them in the right direction, and they'll find a path that's best for them. So what that gets after is the bigger corporate discussion. What are those things that we can do as leaders, military and civilian, to prepare our members and their families, and to give them the right options and the right lenses to see the opportunities out there? There also comes with a sort of a tax that we now, if I am willing to let my members prepare themselves for transition, I also have to allow them the time to transition, right? Mission first, people always, and sometimes you can flip those two. So I think as a leader, it's a balance of those two things, finding out where you can let these folks truly step aside to do that preparation. And then when there are those times when you have to keep them a little longer because the mission requires it. And that's not an easy answer sometimes. And then you put families in the equation, it becomes a little bit more complex.
You have quite a few people in your command. Can you tell us a number?
Well, currently I have 115 people, and that is my staff and cadre. I can have up to 300 students as well, so that brings the number a little bit higher in terms of the mission. But when we speak about those folks that are military and so forth, that would be 115 is a good number.
That's a lot of people to give one-on-one attention to. Are you, aside from being a commander, you're a resource person? We all are as managers, right? And mentors and sponsors and advocates for our folks who we lead, because it truly reflects back on us. What do you think you've learned that you've applied, that you're going to be applying in the future as you go through, or actually you're going through it now, as you go through the soup of the job search?
Well, I think we need to immerse ourselves and our troops into the resources. There's so many of them. So the education piece as to what's out there is important. But following immediately after that is okay, let's dive in and let's start. Anything as simple as the small seminars that teach you how to write a resume, to the bigger conferences and events that allow you really to now speak to experts in the fields that you're interested in. So there's a big gamut of things that you can do. But what I think is more important is to just immerse yourself, dive into the deep end, and again, like I said earlier, our people are very resilient and flexible, agile. So you just got to give them the resources and they'll figure it out themselves.
Let's talk about you. This segment is really about you and your experience being in this process as you look for a job. What's some of the challenges that you're facing?
Well, I kind of alluded to this time. When you're in a position that I'm in, and quite frankly, it happens to the lowest ranks as well, time it's very limited. And to do this right, in my opinion, you have to spend the right quality of time, which takes you now into some of that free time that you otherwise will have. Now is not, but that's part one. The other thing is understanding who you are out of a uniform. And some career fields make that a little bit easier. So if you're cyber and you want to do cyber in the civilian sector, the transition is not easy, but it's a little bit more transparent. When you are someone like myself and my peers, we are commanders, we're generalists, and we walked away from the technical aspects of our mission maybe 10 years ago. So now it's a matter of, okay, one, what have you done? How does that translate into the civilian sector? And this is very important. How do we humbly represent ourselves out there without the rank or the position or really the prestige, that, if you want to call it that you carry with your rank when you walk into a room? You have to divorce yourself from those things. And again, that talks to the mental transition, that there's a lot of books on how to find jobs, how to write resumes, how to interview. There's not a lot of that there, I think, that speaks to you as to how to mentally prepare for that, because it can be somewhat difficult for some folks.
You have done a lot of studying on this, and I spoke to you at our last event about this. I'd love to hear what you're doing to mentally prepare. Is it wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, meditate? Is it eating extra eggs? What are you doing?
Well, I think first and foremost is to keep in a healthy balance between work, life, and transitioning, right? Because now you got three things going on top of everything else. You need to schedule yourself and discipline yourself to not lose sight of the other things that are important to you. The same things, fitness, nutrition, like you said. I think what's helped me personally is being in a very positive state of mind, excitement. I will tell you, in the time I've been in the armed forces, I have never disliked a job. And maybe people will think I'm truly lying. Now, I will tell you, some jobs work better than others. But I've always taken the attitude that every opportunity and job that I have is an opportunity to learn something new, to get excited about it. I've taken the same mentality to this process to transition. And I'm sure it'll be different once I cross that finish line. But right now I'm thinking of it as, well, instead of putting on a uniform in a new job tomorrow, I'll just put a different uniform in a different job tomorrow. And I've done that 15 times in my career. So, I'm going to have to learn a new language. I'm going to have to learn how to dress differently and say things a little differently. But really, I smile because it's not a deployment. I'm not away from family. I'm not packing bags. It's just, a more simpler process, in my opinion.
Is it really? Okay. I like that perspective. Now, you talk about family. I'm assuming that you said 15 duty stations, 15 different locations, 15 different jobs. Explain what 15 was.
Oh, yes, just 15 different assignments in the world in 25 years, and quite frankly, that's not a lot of PCSs. There's folks with more out there. But again, that speaks to not only the resiliency of the service member to do all these things on the go, but also the family.
Right.
So
right.
Very excited to see my family come through this process as well.
You are an advocate for this process, and I imagine that as you continue this, you will continue to mentor and support and sponsor folks. How might people reach out to you? Would that be LinkedIn? Could they find you? Would they be able to communicate to you, or would you direct them to any type of resource?
Well, I think the easiest way, and it kind of helps them get into the habit of networking, is LinkedIn. I will say that. Because it just gets us out of a military mindset of that mail email, right? And I think it forces us to in a very simple manner. It forces those folks out there to, okay, you got to get into LinkedIn. You have to. It's one of those platforms and tools that you just have to. So if you want to reach me, I will say that'd be the best way, so I can share and also learn from others.
It'll be exciting to see, and I know this podcast will be going on for some time. I told you at the beginning this was evergreen, so hopefully that the information you're sharing is relevant. We're going to continue talking about you as a person and some of the, I don't want to say frustrations, but some of the things you've learned that would resonate with our audience. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a couple things that we highlighted before the show?
Okay, so the first thing I will point out as an area for improvement, let me call it that, is we, as a corporate entity, we have very good ideas or very good intentions. We know this, that we need to help our members and our families transition properly. We know that. It's at the core of what we believe. I think what happens a lot of times, how that gets defined into actual reality varies widely. And as it varies, it also fails sometimes to hit the mark that we're trying to get after. The reason for that is multitude of reasons, but I will highlight the fact that we are a very large institution, the Department of Defense in my case, and it's very hard to create a single formula from the top that applies to everyone, right? A soldier, a Marine, etc., they're all different. And then you got different jobs, different locations, et cetera, different backgrounds. So I think what we will learn very quickly as people go through this transition is you really have to be cognizant that the solution that's being presented in front of you may just be a stepping stone to what you truly need to learn. So, and following to the question, the second thing I know is we focus a lot in making sure our members understand the two basics, resumes, right, and also interviewing. But we don't spend enough time, I believe, in exposing them to more resources and also talking a little bit about the mental transition. To me, that's the toughest because we spend a lot of time, I've seen it, and of course I've experienced this through my learning, is I will read a lot about how to write a resume, how to remove language that is not civilian language, yet my first 5 versions of that resume sounded just like that. Right. And again, that's that mental fitness that we need to get into, force ourselves into really doing more. And the third thing, I will call it as an opportunity for improvement, is we cannot fall behind on how do we transition our families. Because, quite frankly, many times we transition because we're ready for the family to settle, right? Because we have kids in school or whatever, situations like that. But I think we do talk about our families, but I don't think we're putting enough effort and sort of quote unquote academics to talk about that and to address that. Now, great programs out there to help our spouses, but there's not the depth that we have for military members that we should have with families. So those are the basic 3 things that and there's tons more things, little things that we can do better, but those are the 3 major ones I've noticed as a transition.
I agree with you, Jose. I've seen in my time serving military folks coming into corporate America, they're very curious, what's next? What do I do? Like, what are the steps that I take? And that's a blessing and a curse because you've been trained so well. You've been trained to not only ask what's appropriate, but to also follow directions. In the working world, in the corporate world, it's a little bit more fungible, flexible, and organic. How might you, let's say you're telling somebody who's going to be going through this process, how might you give advice to someone who is looking to leave a very predictive, structured career environment and going into the unknown, the organic, flexible world of corporate America?
Well, here's the first thing I will tell them. I will tell them to start with the very basics, right? The resume and the interviewing kind of gives you the first shot of, oh, well, this is different. I never had to interview for a job, or very few of us had to, and I never had to write a resume. So that's the first shock. I think the second step in that is I will advise folks to go and immerse yourself in the corporate world as much as you can. And it can be as simple as you go on something like LinkedIn, and if you're interested in a particular company, reach out to that company, somebody, a senior vice president or CEO. Here's the good news, and this is what I've learned personally, is being a veteran gets you a foot through the door. It doesn't give you everything. But I've learned that 9 out of 10 times when I reach to a vice president or president of a company via LinkedIn, and it's simply mentioned, look, I'm a military veteran, I'm transition, I would like to connect and learn from you. 9 out of 10 will connect with you. And then following that, if you ask them, hey, I would like to take 5 minutes of your time to just hear your thoughts on how veterans make your company better. Those simple steps, and by the way, 9 out of those 10 folks also say yes. And those that don't say anything tell you who to go talk to, right? So you batting very well averages here. And those conversations start opening the aperture and making you realize, okay, this is what it means to be on that side. The other thing I will advise folks to do is to take full advantage of the Skill Bridge programs or any other programs like it. Simply because you will not truly understand, and this is true in the military, you will not truly understand that environment or that job or that culture unless you're immersed in it. And that is something that we teach our linguists. To learn a new language, you have to immerse yourself in that language. This is no different. So that will be my other piece of advice, is do not undermine the importance of Skill Bridge. And of course, it's something I haven't done yet, but I'm moving in that direction. Because it's no different than bringing a new member to my team and immersing them in my mission. Well, we have to do that when we go to the civilian sector.
Good advice. You know, one of the things that I see a lot as a former corporate recruiter is people applying very early and getting a ton of rejection. So I just want to remind everybody that if you are in that year of designing your transition into civilian work, if you are looking to potentially move from not into a GS role, but even to serve the military in a contracting role, it is good to network ahead of your availability. But that sweet spot is really in that 3 months before your availability. And that differs between company and then rank. So the enlisted folks start their terminal leave and can be employed pretty quickly, where officers, depending on the company and the ethics and the policy of that company, because they're taking government money, they may not be able to hire them immediately. They may have to be fully separated from the, not double dipping in a sense. So I see a lot of folks who are just frustrated. They've had a ton of rejection. And I don't want to say you're doing it wrong, but there's a lot of timing involved. Now, you are part of an organization that helps teach, as a volunteer, people when to start applying. What have you learned? What advice would you give?
Well, I want to speak real quickly of what you just said, right? The quote-unquote rejections. I will tell folks, don't take that as a rejection. Just take it as, okay, we got to move on, or we got to try different. So, because I hear that a lot, and there's a lot of disappointment in folks that we help that portray that to us, but we tell them it's not just you, it's everyone else. That's how this works. I think what I will advise folks to do is to learn the idiosyncrasies of how the corporate world recruits, brings in talent, trains that talent, and in some cases keeps it or not. There's a very harsh reality that we need to understand because, up to this point, nobody has ever fired us. And I mean, there's a few, of course, but, for the vast majority of us, we never have to worry about those things. So when we first encounter those things, what I like to tell our members is, do not think it's not a bad thing. It just is. It's like going to Antarctica. It's just going to be cold. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just cold, right? Again, it's back to that mental transition. It's a mental muscle memory that we need to shift a little bit. And to your point, yeah, absolutely. I think understanding the sweet spot for applications is very important. And that also comes the side that we tell them is, okay, well, it doesn't mean that you start making a relationship with that recruiter, that entity 3 months out. It means that you develop and enrich that relationship so they understand you. And then 3 months before that position is available, you're going to take the position, hopefully you apply. I think the other thing that we like to highlight with our organization to our veterans and our families is, look, you still need to continue to build relationships in the civilian world. You
Yes.
know, the camaraderie, the spirit of corps is different. It's different, but there's still an element to it that you need to connect from human to human with that other person who's going to talk to you, read your resume, or whatever, make a recommendation, right? That is still very important, and we cannot lose sight of that. And again, I always go back to the mental preparation. You know, our like you said, our members are very well organized. If you give them a checklist, they'll accomplish that. I'm fully aware that every single one of my members will manage to go through a personal center and not process out of the military. They can do that. I'm not worried about that. I'm more concerned or more focused on, okay, how do I mentally help you get ready for those realities that you and I have never seen in our careers?
Well, you certainly are a servant leader. And I'm curious, how many years have you served in the armed forces?
So I'm currently at 25. By the time I'm officially retired, I'll be a month short of 26.
Congratulations. And thank you so much for your support.
Thank you for your support.
I know you and I are going to continue working in a volunteer way as ambassadors, and I'm so thrilled that you are here to talk about your current situation, going through the soup. Is there any last parting thoughts you'd like to leave our audience as they go through their transition or prepare for their transition before we end our segment?
I will say you're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to have to do resumes, which is, to me, wasn't a lot of fun. You're going to have those rejections. You're going to have to learn LinkedIn. But get excited, you know, because you have that code veteran next to your name. And that is a very powerful thing to have next to you because you've earned it. It won't give you everything, but it's a force multiplier. And along with that, I will say, make sure that if you have close ones or a family, excite them too. Because they now will begin to enjoy things that maybe they didn't have a chance to because of all the deployments and all the moves. Now it's kind of a new chapter in an amazing book of accomplishments. So I would say be excited, be prepared, be ready, but don't look at it as challenge. Look at it as opportunities.
Agreed. You are trained, you are skilled, you are strong, and you are brave. I agree with you 100%. Jose, what an honor. Thank you so much for giving your advice and sharing your story. I know we'll have you back on the show for other segments, but for today, we're just going to say goodbye. And for our listeners, we'll be back right after this.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
Change.
Hi, welcome back. I'm your host, Cheryl Cross. I have brought Mary Despe to the show before. Today, she's joining us to talk about application, meaning when you start applying for jobs, what's on the other side of that fence, so to speak? What's going on the corporate side? So, welcome to the show again, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say about applications.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really interesting that there's such a focus now that resumes are really tailored to the specific job descriptions that are advertised out there. I was saying that I remember a time where you could just create a resume. It was kind of a historical record, if you will, of what you knew and what you studied and what you did, and then you'd put it out there in the universe, and hopefully someone would come back to you with a job, you know, or something similar to that. It's very much not like that anymore. And we were just talking before we went live about this, that, you know, it's very tailored to the position, the language that's posted on the internet, and what your resume, how it stacks up against that language. Because in a lot of the early stages of candidate selection and screening, a lot of it's done by AI tools, or they're automated, where, you know, there are programming devices and what have you, ranking what you're putting forth in your resume against the job description and putting that against the pool of people who have applied. So it's an interesting time because it wasn't always like that, but now there's more and more of an emphasis on that.
You bring up a point about algorithms, and a lot of companies, in order to save time, are using algorithms for AI, artificial intelligence. Now, I brought this up on another show. I remember when the voice, or sorry, not the voice, but yes, the voice and the facial recognition tools were used for sales positions, and how delineating that was to our diversity, equity, inclusion folks who, raised their hand in corporate culture and said, hey, 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 hold on. If you're modeling from somebody, what are you looking for? Maybe some culture, races, genders don't have those characteristics, or and somebody said to me once, well, I'm just looking for an energy. It's like, well, you can hear an energy on the phone. You can do that with a human being. So I don't think all AI is bad. Don't get me wrong. Chat GPT has changed the world, and it certainly has helped a lot of folks create resumes that are very specific to those job descriptions. I'm going to take a pause and remind our military friends that if you are active duty and you're continuing your service, maybe the mission into a government contracting role, anyone who's taking money from the government to staff you for a position is up against OFCCP guidelines. And those guidelines are very strict. So if a requisition is posted, you need to meet, I'd say, the majority of what is needed. And most companies that I've seen have them in the must haves and nice to haves. So those must haves are pretty much 90 to 100%. They don't have a lot of flex room because they will be audited against that. And I know it's frustrating, but if you have 4 years of experience and the requisition's asking for 6, you probably won't be looked at. And if, as a job seeker, you're like, well, I can do that job. Well, you might not have the amount of experience that the client or the contract or the mission is looking for. So thanks for letting me talk a little bit about military stuff.
Yeah.
How do you coach people? You're a career advisor and you work with people one on one. How do you coach them to apply? And are you a cheerleader through the process? Because it's so frustrating. It is
Oh,
so
yeah.
frustrating. And then we'll talk about timelines for military too. So tell me about how you work with people one on one.
Yeah, gosh, such a good thing. I mean, with respect to the application process and, well, just the job search in general, it's kind of brutal out there. I'm not going to lie. And it's really a case where, there's less human interaction, live personal interaction at some point, making decisions about how far we move forward. I mean, I don't say that to be sinister. I say that because it's reality. But
Yeah.
we're not going to be a society just yet of like not interacting with people. When I coach, it's really about a strategy. So it's multifaceted. It's not just applying to many job boards or many things online. It's a lot of the other things that really make the difference, especially when you get on with your career. It's the networking, it's the follow up, it's the, let me get a little creative to see how I can stand out and get time with people that might have some sort of influence with this or insight. It's really coming up with a plan that hits, job and professional development from a few different
Mhm.
angles. So it's more than just applying online, even though that is very important to know where to go and target and look for things that are suitable for you.
I think a lot of people, when they're applying, they do two things. In the military, you have an availability timeline. Many of you, I hope, are getting ahead of this at least 1 year out. But when you start applying to jobs, there's that availability timeline. And keep in mind, folks, when you're applying to jobs, those jobs are open right now, right now. And most likely a recruiter needs to fill them within the 30, 60, 90-day threshold. If you're not leaving the military for another 12 months, I don't recommend you apply. I recommend you start networking, and maybe not with just the recruiter. Because
Yes.
recruiters, again, you're trying to fill those jobs, right? I, as a corporate recruiter, I was reached out to 100 different ways people would come into my office and hand a resume, which is very cool and very old school. But I wasn't always able to spend time with them because I didn't prepare for it. My focus was truly on those jobs that I needed to fill, and we call them requisitions. So don't think the recruiter is terrible if they don't get back to you on LinkedIn. They're probably getting about 100 of you a week. That's fine. And if they do speak to you, please have them call me. I'd love to interview them. Um, the other thing is, there's a sweet spot, and it depends on everyone's availability. If you're available in the next 3 months, yes, start hitting that apply button. Especially if you know where you're going to be living, PCSing, or going back to your home of record, or wherever you or your family have decided to move. So those things are very important. We talk a lot about that in the prep, and a lot of the folks who are going through the transition will talk about that. Mary, you said something about, I'm going to switch over to the the thing we all forget. We throw spaghetti to the wall, we apply to a lot of jobs, and then we sit back and we wait.
Mhm.
And then we get those, I'm sorry, you weren't selected. Thank you so much. What a pleasure it was for you to have, for you not to be accepted. You get those really generated emails, and that digs away at your ego. I'll be honest. I've gone through
Mhm.
that too. So the hygiene, you talked about the hygiene of networking and follow up. What does that look like really?
And honestly, Cheryl, this is where I feel like a lot of people, this is where we, separate like the people who just do enough from the people who really want it. And, sometimes people get mad when I say that, but I believe it's really true. And the networking and the follow up, I mean, it's exactly as you said that networking, it's far more than a conversation with a recruiter. It's finding out information from people who are doing the kind of work you want to be doing. How have they
Yes.
done it? It's learning more about a company, and what their business roadmap is for the next year or so, or what they're planning. It's having these conversations, and you can do it in many different ways. You can do it one-on-one. You can do it by attending events that a company is sponsoring and then just mingling with people on staff. You can reach out to people on, say, LinkedIn, and be earnest and sincere with your reach out, and seeing if people would be willing to chat with you a bit more about your targeted interest on something. It's a lot of different things, but I think that networking is so important. It's something that should happen all the time, not just like a one-time transactional thing, which a lot of job seekers feel. And right now I'm working with a lot of professionals who are going through a career transition due to layoff. And so,
Hmm.
it's like, oh, I need a job. I need a job. I need a job. I'm networking. But it's like, well, you're asking for a referral for a job, and that's all you're doing. What else are you doing to build your intelligence about the company, about how they're adding value to their customers? Like,
Hmm.
how are you getting this? And this is, much more than just a one time thing. Same thing with the follow up. I mean, I think we've all been there. We've gotten that really horrible, quick, thank you for applying, but we're moving on with someone else, or someone else
Yeah.
was selected. It's interesting because, you can take that as like, okay, cool. They're telling me it's over. But I've had a number of people say, I don't really agree with that. And they go around and try to find people, like just from their own networking, like, I am really good for this role. Let me prove it to you. They kind of take it and as fire to the belly, just to kind of look and see if there are other creative ways to get to know more people there that can help bring visibility to their background. So I've
Hmm.
actually had someone within the last 2 months who got one of those automated rejection letters. He's getting an offer because it was like a second pass. Yeah, but it was not easy. It was like three or
No.
four follow-ups afterwards. So anyway, yeah.
Had he or she had they already been interviewed?
No, they had just
Oh,
gotten the rejection email, which is very popular now in this market, that it's like, boom, mass emails of decline, applications. And this particular person was really, he was upset about it. He felt like the role was perfect for him. And so he just took it upon himself, that initiative, to just seek out other ways to see how he could reinsert himself in the process. And he did. He did. I mean, he
Wow.
followed up with like reaching out on LinkedIn to a couple of people that he knew that knew others that were hiring in that department and said, I really think I deserve a second pass. This is an unusual story, but this is what I'm talking
Yes.
about. That it's like
Yes.
there are those who just do, like enough, and then those who want it a little more. So,
Yes.
it's okay to be a little creative and have a little more initiative.
Without being fanatical. Please
Yeah, without
don't
being
drive them
fanatical.
crazy. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
it's a
respectful.
really it's a razor's edge there.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
you talked about knowing a company. There's more and more companies that are doing exposure programs for military and those who are coming from the military or who have served. So let's not just assume that you're either transitioning or going to be transitioning. Maybe you've already transitioned out and you don't like your job. A lot of you are in that role too. So, skill bridge, internships, Hiring Our Heroes calls it a fellowship, corporate fellowships, exposure programs. So exposure programs are becoming more and more popular. Now again, with the military timeline, it's a bit of a dance, right? You have usually the skill bridge time is the last 180 days of your military
Mhm,
service, which
mhm,
tends to work well. So 11 weeks or 12 weeks with a company is a long time for you to get exposure into that company. And many companies that I know, I have a client that has done it for many years. They don't say you're coming in with a job. You have 11 weeks to interview for a job. Their job is to interview you or put you in front of a hiring team and give you the opportunity. But it's up to you to really expose yourself to the opportunity, get into the culture, and that is invaluable. I wish more
mhm.
companies would do it. You really focused on being creative, and I really, when you said that that person went back to the recruiter or the team and said, hey, I really want to be looked at, I've had that happen and it hasn't been so pleasant. How might you work with somebody? I've worked with, not as a consultant, but I've had people come to me and say, I was rejected for that. i
Mhm.
I know I'm the right person for the job. And in my mind, that sort of puts you in another bank of I'll probably never speak to you again because that's not your job to determine what my hiring team or my corporation needs. So give me another take on that, how you might work with someone so they don't fall into that bucket.
Yeah, no, this is a good discussion because that happens quite a bit too. And even though I did give that example, I mean, I would say that's exceptional, the example I
Hmm.
gave. And certainly, it all goes back to the strategy of how you're applying. It's multifaceted. And then I think the other thing that I would say with this is it's always important to have like your eye on the long game in these kind of
Hmm.
situations because it's far more than just, the one job. I
Right.
mean, if you feel like it is very appropriate for you, and you are that compelled to follow up, do it by all means. I mean, I think it's always good to get feedback, ask for it from your, point of contact if there's anything that they can share. It's funny because a lot of people don't ask for feedback. They're like, oh, they'll probably not say anything or nothing helpful. I'm like,
Hmm.
I mean, you can control your part,
Right.
leave them to control their part, and see, just be open to that. And while not everyone will give that, someone eventually will in your journey. The important thing is that we can control what we do in the process of our job search. And it is, it's something that it's important to keep your eye on the long game of what you're wanting to achieve. So if one opportunity in this whole, journey that you're on says no, you can pick and choose if it's worth it to you to pursue it or move on and learn from it, right? So the thing is that we often wrap our hopes and dreams into one opportunity at a time, but it's also
Yes.
helpful to kind of take a step back and be like, what did I learn from this to help me for this next one? Obviously, I'm still on this journey. And, we can only be in control of what we, have control of. We can't really respond and know exactly what other people will do, because that's their choice, and this is what they're going to decide. But we can stay consistent and give our 110% for our search where we want to be each week. So it's not an easy coaching session, but like I always, when I work with clients, it's like the reflection of like, okay, so what else did we learn here? What can we take forward from this? And it really is to just kind of keep it as like a bank, of like all these little bits of nuggets that we're learning along the way, and how that's going to really help us land and be where we want to be. So that's usually how we focus and center our conversations in coaching, knowing that you're not going to win everything. You're not. You're probably going to hear more no's.
Yes, and be prepared for that. I think, I appreciate the military training so much because it is based on resilience. And I think military folks come into the workplace with such great skills in terms of resilience and the ability to see the big picture because they're looking at maybe um, a mission. It's not just the now. They're not as reactive either. So thank you for saying that. I also agree with you when you talk about, be prepared to walk away. Always be prepared. Even don't get too excited for a role. Get excited when the offer comes through and you start negotiating the salary if you haven't already. Get excited when you know that this is going to be a thing. So anyway, Mary, you and I were going to continue our conversations in other segments. You've been so invaluable. The application process is just full of, I hate to say landmines, but it's full of surprises. It's full of learning opportunities and growths. Why don't you tell our folks who are listening how they might reach you? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn is usually the best way to reach out to me. You can look me up, Mary Despe, Despe, and I'm happy to connect with people. I also like networking. I offer like a 20-minute networking call. So I
Ooh.
have, yeah, you can book a time with me anytime, and, we can work it out. And I'd love to get to learn more about people in depth.
I highly recommend you take her up on that. She's outstanding. Mary, thanks so much for being on the show. And I want to thank you for listening. We'll be back with more.
Change.
Welcome back to Exchange. I'm your host, Cheryl Cross, and for our expert segment, we have Marisol Maloney. And today she's going to be talking to us about salary negotiation, salary expectations. She is a former Navy veteran, current mil spouse. She is a recruiter, an entrepreneur, and a career coach for those transitioning from the military. Welcome, Marisol.
Hi, Cheryl. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this segment because I don't think we can talk about it enough. We talked on the phone about salary expectations. Why don't you tell me how you see it from the recruiter side and how you want to approach it as a coach?
When candidates come to me for the jobs that I have available as a recruiter, they usually expect more money or the same amount of money that they're currently making in the military, especially the senior enlisted and more senior officers. When in reality, some of the roles that they're seeking out may not pay what they're currently getting in the military. And when you transition out of the military, you really have to do your research on what the roles you're seeking next pay by location. A role that you want in Honolulu may not pay the same as Atlanta, Georgia, or Jacksonville, Florida. So you need to be aware of the cost of living and what those jobs pay, especially if you're doing a complete career transition. I was recently working with a gentleman. He was trying to get a role in emergency management, and the national average at the time that he was looking was about 90,000. So he was like, "Wait, but I'm in '04 making, I forget how much he was making, but he was including BAS and BAH." And that's the mistake that pretty much like over 90% of transition military make. They want to include what they used to make, including the BAH, which you don't get that once you get out. So really, you need to focus on more of what your base military base pay and work around that. Take it from there. Just because you're in '06 doesn't mean you're going to walk into a $200,000 job. I'm not saying it can't happen, but you really have to do your research and network and then prove to that company why you are worth $200,000. And I promise you, they will be working you for those $200,000.
It's so true. And living in a very high cost of living state, as I do, and recruiting for the region of the highest cost of living for the globe, I can tell you that as folks were leaving the military and coming to talk to me for whatever corporation I was working for, that was truly hard for them to do because, quite frankly, it does play into their bottom line. They do, if they're the primary income earner or even if they have a dual income, it makes a difference. Are you going to go to, well, we have Zippies here. How much are you going to be taking your family out? How is this going into your personal savings or budget? How is it changing things? I think it's valuable. You talk about the first year a lot. When I talk to candidates about salary, I always used to say, definitely have a bottom that you're not willing to go below, but know that you won't sit there forever. Do you think that's a fair conversation to have during the salary negotiation?
Absolutely. You have to know what your absolute minimum is to live and to support your family. And also, what I tell people, there are other things you can negotiate as well. Depending on the industry and the role, you could probably negotiate a company car if it's an on-site job. You can negotiate maybe a work phone, a work laptop. These are things that can save you money. Maybe you can negotiate a bonus, you know, when you get that offer letter. So
A
there's
sign-on
different things,
bonus.
a sign-on bonus that you can
Mm-hmm.
negotiate.
Another thing that I saw that's getting more popular, the military will move you back to your home of record, of course, if you're in a duty station that isn't near your home of record. And I think you can keep kicking that can down the street for every year if you don't use it, say you stay in a certain location. But a lot of companies are offering relocation packages or relocation budgets. How would you use that as a leverage against a salary? Would you include it in the total compensation? Every recruiter I speak to is differently. What would you advise your clients to do?
I would absolutely ask for that relocation allowance if they offer it. So you have to keep in mind, not everybody offers that. So when I was a candidate, transition out of the military, these are my must-haves that I wanted. I wanted a relocation allowance if I was going to move. I wanted to work with a company that offered tuition reimbursement because I didn't want to tap into my GI Bill, even though I have it, and I still haven't tapped into it. So, for example, my company paid me to work to get my Lean Six Sigma black belt. And
Oh,
there's
wow.
also other programs out there for veterans that offer you free certifications, like Onward to Opportunity, as an example. But yes, you can negotiate different things. And so you need to know what you want from a company. Do you want training? Will they pay for your training? For example, my company sends me to conferences, and I love it. And they're expensive too, so I like that they pay for that. So find
Mhm.
out what they offer and if it's what you want and or need. So only you know
Mhm.
that. Like for me,
Mhm.
I'm a nerd. I love learning new things. I love training. So I'm gonna keep asking my employer for other certifications for them to pay for me.
So earlier you said something about not taking your HOLA or your COLA, your cost of living allowance or your housing allowance, and putting that into the salary. I do know on the international front, for those folks who are listening, if they wanted to go to a TESA or a SOFA supported country, some of those contracts per company, based if it's a government contracting company per se, they may have baked that in, but not every company has those independent contracts. They're corporations that have sort of the same jobs over and over. Would you recommend, if they didn't see it on the website or they didn't hear it maybe from someone they know that worked at the corporation, to boldly ask for things that are sort of out? At what point do you stop asking for things?
I think it starts with the recruiter. The recruiter, for the most part, should know some of that stuff. And yes, you can also ask it of the hiring manager, especially in the interview when they ask you, do you have any questions for us? That's your time to go in for the kill and say, yes, do you offer a relocation allowance or any additional funds to cover the cost of living? Housing, maybe they provide housing. You never know. And that's something that could
Hmm.
help you. So these are important questions that you should ask early. Don't ask them after you've gotten the offer letter and then expect them to just give you something because they already gave you the offer letter. Like, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes, yes, it may work out in your favor, but other times it may work against you. So be smart on your approach. But I say talk to the recruiter first.
It's so important to do this work up front. And I actually created a class that I gave to the TAPS folks over at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, and it was truly understanding what your anchors are for your salary negotiation. So you're walking into a conversation with confidence because you've already prepared for that part. So that you know what your bottom line is. In the MBA and the master's classes, you'll hear something called BATNA, the bottom best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So BATNA is, to me, the floor. You don't go under the floor. You don't go to the basement. So this is the minimum, but you don't say it out loud. You know what your BATNA is, and you're willing to negotiate in a range. Another thing I always ask clients, or excuse me, candidates to do would be give me a $10,000 range. Now, I had a lot of freedom and flexibility in some of my recruiting roles. Other companies do not. And also, I think it's important to add, Marisol, what type of recruiter are you? Because we need to educate these folks on the different types of recruiters, how they represent the companies. Are they working for themselves? Are they getting a fee based on their placement? Do you want to start that conversation?
Sure. Yes. So I'm a corporate recruiter, meaning I work directly for the company. I know there's like third-party recruiters, contracting recruiters, but I work directly for my company and I recruit mostly for intelligence analysts with top secret clearances. And I also recruit for financial fraud analysts and we place them with the Secret Service. So most of my candidates are usually veterans or transitioning service members because they already have the clearances.
So you are really a true ambassador for your client or for your company. You're an employee, and you are looking at people just for those roles. Have you, I can explain what a contingent recruiter is, or they call them headhunters for those listening. Those folks are working with you as an individual and they are shopping you or representing you as a recruiter to their companies that they have as clients. Hopefully they have vendor relationships. I would hedge everyone listening. If a contingent recruiter comes to you and says, I'd like to represent you because you're a great candidate, ask to hear who the clients are. Ask if they have contractual vendor relationships with them. You don't want your resume to go unsolicited to a corporation. It's not appreciated, and I think it's bad practice. Contract recruiters are also, I think, we hired a bunch of them in some of my other roles. Those folks acted as if they were with the company, so they are representing a client, but they may have a company that they're representing several. But each time they speak to you, they're speaking to you about one company. I know that gets confusing, and we'll be explaining that over and over as these segments go on. But, salary is something that is so frustrating and so Marisol, I see so many issues when people came to the salary conversation and they just stopped. They hadn't done the homework. They hadn't researched where they wanted to go. They didn't know the cost of living. They hadn't gone and done the homework. How much time do you request your clients spend just on the salary ask?
For the research, I recommend they spend a good 2 hours, maybe 30 minutes a day, because I know it can be overwhelming. And some of the websites that I recommend going on is payscale.com, salary.com, Glassdoor, Indeed, LinkedIn. And also, don't be afraid to ask the recruiter, what does this job pay? And in some states now, the employer has to divulge the salary. I know California is one of the states, and I believe New York. There's a few others. So not all the states are doing this, but some laws have been passed where employers in certain states have to tell you the salary.
And big global corporations that have jobs in many states are just doing it as a best practice, that if one job requisition says it, all of their job requisitions should say it, which is wonderful. Speaking of best practices and now law, I want to talk about why a company cannot ask you they can ask salary expectations, but why a company cannot ask how much are you making?
I don't know the exact law, but it is illegal for them to ask you that. And there are companies that still do that. Maybe they just slip up. I don't know. But I have candidates tell me that other companies they've interviewed with have asked them that. And unless you're going for a federal job, which they still ask you that for whatever reason, federal jobs get away with it. Corporate companies cannot do that.
That's
So be
right.
mindful of that.
And what else plays into salary? I know this as a vet. Retirement. Why should you never talk about your retirement benefits or any money that the military is giving you when you negotiate your salary?
Plain and simple, it's none of their business. It really is not none of their business. And you shouldn't incorporate that as part of your negotiation. And also don't tell them, "Oh, well, I have medical and dental, so I don't need your medical benefits." Just if you want to decline them, fine, but don't tell them why. Just I don't want them. Don't say because I'm getting all these medical benefits or however you want to sell it, because some companies are not going to give you extra money. You can try to negotiate more, but they will not always give you more money just because you turn down their medical and dental benefits. So keep that in mind.
Agreed. And one of the reasons that is because companies buy into these plans and offer them because they have such a great workforce or a number of people, which is why the rates could get lower. So generally, and it's not every company, because small companies can negotiate these things, but large corporate, usually publicly traded companies, I see is kind of the norm. They use their benefits package and it's set for everyone, so it's fair to everyone. So every new hire gets this. And if you choose to use the health insurance, that's fine, but it's not negotiable to add to your salary. I tell everybody your salary is the best part of negotiating, that base salary, and then conversation for a sign on. Now, let's talk about sign ons because I think I've heard so many times, well, I'll just make it up with the sign on bonus. Where's the big banner in the sky that says that everybody has a sign-on bonus? Does your company represent sign-up bonuses, or do you guys have sign-up bonuses?
It depends. It depends on what client we're representing, whether it's, Secret Service, if we're the prime. So these are some things that people need to be aware of. Is the company that's hiring, are they the prime contractor or are they the subprime? So if we're the prime, sometimes they can offer a sign-on bonus, but not always. And
Correct.
it could be anywhere between 5,000, 10,000, or it could be less. It varies by company and by the size of their budget and also the amount of money allotted for that role. So maybe it could only be like $500 or something like that. So don't always expect a sign-on bonus just because you feel you deserve it. Same thing with the
That is
salary
correct.
ranges. If a role pays between 100 and 120,000, don't expect that you're going to get 120,000. If you think you're worth 120,000 for a certain role, then you better bring it. You better show them the skills, the years of experience, your education. If it requires a degree, then you better show them that degree. If it requires a certain certification, like a project management professional certification, then you better have it if you want top dollar. So be
Agreed.
mindful of that. Just because they can offer up to, I don't know, 200,000 doesn't mean you will get it or that you even rate it based on your years of experience.
I like that. Undervaluing yourself. How have you seen people undervalue themselves in the salary negotiation process or the salary ask?
Yeah, so I've seen the opposite effect too. So some people will overvalue themselves and some will undervalue themselves. And in both instances is lack of education, lack of research. Know your worth. So I've noticed it's been common with women actually. Women tend to undervalue themselves and they're like, "Oh yeah, I want maybe 80,000, but the role I'm hiring for pays starting 120." I'm like, "Try higher. You're gonna get a minimum of 120." And they're like, "Oh my God, thank you so much." But I'm that type of recruiter. I will give you the actual salary range. Some recruiters, for whatever reason, they're not allowed to give you a range. I don't know why. For the states that, they still can get away with that. But I always share the range. Even before the laws passed, I was sharing the range with everybody. So I'm like, this is the minimum, this is the most you can make. And I'll explain to them if the hiring manager feels that you're worth the top dollar, they will pay you the top dollar.
I think it's worthwhile to ask. What I've seen a lot of companies do on those ranges, Marisol, is they give such a broad range. When you're giving a $20, $30, $40,000 range,
That's too
it's
much.
really hard. Again, they're doing it because I believe they have to, right? This is now law, but they have flexibility if they have to have that flexibility based on your experience, based on their contract. And let me remind you, on government awarded contracts for companies that are handling those are audited constantly. So if you have contracted 30 people at a certain rate, you can't pay above that rate unless you go into your own coffers as a company and pay more. And some companies obviously do that because there is a war on talent. And I just want to say thank you, Marisol. We're at time. I think we could talk an entire hour. I'm certainly going to have you back on other segments to talk about just everything under the sun. You are so valuable. Thank you so much. How
Thank
might
you.
somebody get a hold of you? Is it LinkedIn you want? Can you spell the name for those who are watching on the video? Can you tell people how to reach you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm always giving transition advice, resume tips, and you can also book a time if you wanted to hire me to, write your resume or optimize your LinkedIn profile so more recruiters can find you. You can just book a time with me on my Calendly. Just go to my About section. It's listed on there. You can connect with me, send me a message, ask me any questions you want. And yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Let's connect.
Marisol, Maloney.
Yes.
Mousd. Marisol Maloney, thank you so much for your time and energy today, Marisol. You're a rock star.
Thank
For
you.
those of you listening, I certainly appreciate you being here today. We'll be right back.
Change.
Hello, welcome back. On our expert segment today, I'm so honored to have former law enforcement and now career coach Tracy Forche. Tracy, welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to what you have to tell us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I found you on LinkedIn, which is such a great way to find experts, and you were participating in a panel where people, not just former military, but former paramilitary, had great advice. I know that you've made transitions from military into a different career, and you're helping others, not necessarily law enforcement, but people from all walks of life and careers go into different careers. Tell us why you chose Valiant for your resume company and what you're doing and why.
So, the interesting story about why I chose the name Valiant Resumes is because I was looking for a word that was a synonym for worthy. And since resume worthy was already taken, I started checking some other synonyms. And lo and behold, Valiant, the third definition for Valiant, is excellent or worthy. And so that was why I chose that name for my business. I've been doing resumes, since like the early 90s. I was in human resources for like 14 years before I transitioned to law enforcement, and I was there for 13 years. And then I just retired in August. And now what I do is I do resumes, LinkedIn profiles, and I'm getting certified in career coaching and interview coaching as well. And so that's what I do now.
Talk to me about that. So as an interview coach, what are you providing to clients? How are you helping them?
So what I've seen is that a lot of people try to wing interviews. And it really helps if you're prepared, because what I do is I've got a lot of my clients have been turned into top candidates where they landed their dream jobs, and that's really my goal. And the way to do that is to be prepared for your interview. So what I do is I teach you secrets that top candidates use so that you can win the interview. Now, I can't guarantee a job because that's up to the hiring manager, but the techniques that I do teach at least have a great chance of putting you on the forefront of a hiring manager's mind.
Just give us one of those secrets. If, I know as professionals in this industry, we kind of all know, but the folks that are listening may not know. So if you were to give one of those three without selling the farm, so to speak, what would you say the best secret is?
I'd say definitely have an elevator pitch ready. Anywhere between 30 to 45 seconds to no more than a minute. And sometimes that elevator pitch can answer questions that the hiring manager or recruiter may ask you, but your elevator pitch may have already answered that question. So definitely have an elevator pitch prepared.
So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Can you give us your elevator pitch?
I haven't prepared one in a while, but I'll give you the one that I used when I was interviewing in front of an oral board. Okay.
Go for it.
So mine was, my name is Tracy Forche. I have a bachelor's degree in human relations and business and a master's in training and development. I have 13 years on the department. I was a field training officer for 5 years. And what I do is I am looking forward to, oh gosh, hang on, I messed up. Let me back up. I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great. See, I just want everyone to know that we're not editing this out, because even the best have some hiccups. So let's take a collective deep breath and just go, pull yourself back, and I will, I'll wait. I'm going to share a little tip that I tell people. I use the past. You hear this analogy, past, present, future. I use present, past, future to train people for elevator fit pitches. Mine aren't 30 seconds, they're more like 11. So if you're using present, past, future, grounding yourself in the present, then talking about briefly your past, what you did, and then a future statement, which could also be an ask. So I'm Cheryl Cross. I'm currently a podcast producer and your host today, former corporate recruiter, among other things. And today I'm looking forward to interviewing you, Tracy. That's my 11 seconds using present, past, future. So go ahead, knock us out with your elevator pitch.
Okay, so I'm going to start over. Hang on, let me get back on the screen that I was looking at. Hang on. Okay, so I'm going to start over. So I'm Tracy Forche. I have a bachelor's degree in human relations and business. I have a master's in training and development. I've got 13 years on the department, and I have 8 years in patrol, 5 years as a field training officer. And my mission is to help the citizens of the city, to protect and serve them. And as a leader, I look forward to setting a positive example for my troops to follow.
I like that. It really shows your background and your integrity, which is big in law enforcement. We have to show the human side of a group that's not always seen as human. Did it work? I'm curious. How did that go?
Yeah, it was really good. It was actually the second one we did where we had to do it actually on video. So we didn't have to do it in front of people, but we still had to practice it anyway.
Mm-hmm. I've worked a lot with fire and police as a non-essential civilian communications volunteer. I've never worn a badge, and I certainly haven't carried a gun or protected anyone other than my own home. But I have such admiration for what you all do, and I know from working with these groups that they're not orators. They are not comfortable taking sometimes the podium. They look at that like that's somebody who wants to be commander, police chief, et cetera, et cetera. So those folks who are not comfortable with that, let's say you're working with somebody who's wanting to transition to the next stage in their career within law enforcement, what would you say to them if they said, I'm not really a great speaker? How would you work with them?
That's okay if they're not a great speaker. It just takes a lot of practice. And what I did was I made sure that I attended every single practice session that I could. And people that weren't great speakers also were encouraged to attend every practice session that they could. What I do for my clients is I work with them one-on-one. I also do practice like mock interviews. I also help you with what to say and the best way to say it, so that you stand out to a hiring manager. So it can be pretty uncomfortable because, to be honest with you, believe it or not, I am an introvert. So speaking is something that I have to practice constantly because I'm not comfortable a lot of times speaking out in public, but I've had to learn. And one of the best ways that I learned how to improve my speaking was to start teaching classes. So I actually taught in-service officers, and I taught at the Basic Academy. I also taught recruits at colleges. And so just by me teaching those classes, I improved my public speaking so many times over. And then also, you can also enroll in public speaking courses like Toastmasters. Just start doing things to be able to perfect your speaking, because that right there, even the executives, the high executives will tell you one of the best things to do for you to advance is to improve your public speaking.
Interesting. I appreciate that. I am a professional speaker. I learned at a very young age how to be a broadcaster, so that's kind of carried through with me. I can stand in front of a camera. I can be in a microphone. I can, give me a microphone and you just can't shut me up. But I really admire those folks who come to me or in standing in presentations and being very authentic. I think that is far more impressionable, more of an impression than being fake. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel they have to be polished. I can get up and sound like a broadcaster, and that went out about 30 years ago too. But they're even now in commercials and narrations, book narrations, or any of the professional voiceovers. They don't want someone that sounds like a radio broadcaster from 1980. They don't. It's all about authenticity. So as folks who are listening and appreciating your journey and your advice, I want to remind you that it's okay to stumble. It's okay to say, can I go back to that later? It's okay to just be honest. I don't know anybody who's in an interview that isn't nervous. Even those pros, when they're interviewed, they get nervous. I do. I'm an expert at interviewing. I'm an expert at negotiation, but boy, it's challenging when I have to do it for myself. Right. So just know that that's human. And if you weren't uncomfortable, I would worry.
Yeah. And it's okay. It's okay to ask an interviewer to either repeat the question or to ask for clarification. That's perfectly okay.
Yes. So what do you think? Let me throw some scenarios. Let's say I'm your client and I say to you, Tracy, I'm worried. I'm an introvert. I have, sometimes I can stutter. I kind of, can't think of the word right away. I'm really nervous. Would it be okay if I said to the interview team, I'm really nervous? What would your feedback be on that?
I wouldn't say to tell them that you're nervous. They already know that you are, because as a former hiring manager and recruiter, I had my share of nervousness too, interviewing others. And I've also been in the same seat where I've been interviewed. So they know that you're already nervous. But what I do teach you is I teach you little tricks and things to help spur your memory. I even teach you little body language secrets to help you overcome your nervousness. Because the more confident that you are, the better you're going to do. And that's not just with interviews, that's with anything. And so I really work with you to teach you certain tricks to help you.
So I'm sitting here, I'm like kind of turtling, as a behavior panel would say, my favorite behaviorist. I'm turtling, I'm kind of, I'm in this cramped little space. This could be a video interview for me. What would you recommend that I do differently as my coach?
So
other than sit up.
So I would teach you proper body language. There's ways that, like, leaders, they hold their hands a certain way. There's other things that you can do to help spur your memory, like counting on your fingers. You can do that to help you. Like, first, this is what I did. Second, this is what happened. Third, this was the result. You can use your fingers to help you. You can
First,
even, it's okay to even pause and say, and to just think about it for a little bit. That's perfectly okay to do.
Yeah. I cannot tell those folks that are listening how important it is to work with another person. We gloss over our mistakes, just like you should never clean your own house because you're going to look past the dust bunnies. You see them all the time. Having someone else have eyeballs on your behavior is so important. And, maybe you can't go out and hire a Tracy Forche. I hope you can, at least enlist her services at some point. But if you don't have access to a career coach, interview coach, resume writer, I recommend you get a family member, and I recommend you get a child, maybe a neighbor, somebody who's not worried you're going to hold back their allowance. But somebody who's a little bit more unfiltered to give you feedback, because children can feel that, they feel energy, and they might say, wow, you're amazing, because you really are. Or they could say, yeah, I didn't like that you adjusted your glasses a lot. That was weird. Children are a great barometer. They're probably not the best barometer sometimes. They may say some corny things, but hopefully you can get some professional advice. And, before we close out the segment, we have just a couple minutes left. I want to know really what is the greatest advantage or what makes you so passionate about what you do. And you said earlier you love helping people get jobs. It's not your job to get them a job. You give them the tools. But what's your motivation for doing this work?
So I'm just really fulfilled when it comes to helping others. As I said earlier, I do have a training background. I was a field training officer for several years. And one of the things I really, really enjoy is taking somebody from here to here. And then when they get it and it just clicks, that's when I'm like, yes. And that is very fulfilling to me. And then there was also a time when I was a teen choir director, and so just being able to give everything to them and for them to see it come to fruition from there was just so fulfilling to me. So for me, it's more intrinsic, just really helping people get to the next level and seeing how far that they grow. And that right there means so much more to me than anything else. It's not, for my business isn't just about the money. My business is about the people that I help.
And how many sessions do you usually do with clients? Is it, how often do you meet? What's your schedule like?
Well, since I'm just getting my certifications at the end of this month, I haven't started any, I don't say you have X amount of sessions. So I'll give you as many sessions as you need to be able to get to where you need to be.
Okay. And I would encourage people to not just hire someone for one time. Like Tracy said, seeing progression is really a confidence builder, not just for you, the client, but for the coach. And, I want to say that the things that you're encountering aren't necessarily unknown, but reading them or seeing them on a YouTube or a podcast don't necessarily make it work for you. You really have to take 1,000-point of light approach. It may be reading something, trying something new, and then finding your speed. But the goal is, the resume gets you the interview gets you the job. And all of these components are very different. There's no magic formula. If there was, there wouldn't be a podcast like this or career coaches like Tracy. You just follow that protocol and bingo, bango, you'd get a job. It's different for everyone. And I think one of the things that the beauty of this is if you're willing to uncover some of those truths, those things that you need to work on, you really will find that this is life-changing. You're going into one of the most important decisions you'll make in your life. And where you live, where you work, who you marry, all of these things, death, marriage, jobs, those are the top 3 big impacts into any person's life. So jobs are very important. Finding the right job for you is great, and what we're all looking forward to. I'd love for my folks to reach out to you, and they're not my folks, they're our community. How might our community reach out to you, Tracy? Can you give us, you say your name differently than it's spelled, so why don't you spell your name and hook us up on your LinkedIn?
Okay, so my name's Tracy Forshey. It's spelled Tracy, and my last name is Forsha. You can reach me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Tracy-Forshey/, or you can reach me on my email, tracy@valiantresumes.com, or you can go to my website at www.valiantresumes.com. Those are really the best ways to reach me.
Tracy's an outstanding advocate for all people, not just those who are leaving law enforcement or looking to get bigger careers within law enforcement, but she also works with military spouses, and those folks who are not in either. So thank you, Tracy. You're such a pleasure. I know that you're going to just continue killing it, and I look forward to seeing when you get that that certification for your interviewing. I know you're going to be back on the podcast as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.
I cannot believe it has been 4 episodes. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for being a part of this crucial journey and this dream of mine. I'm Cheryl Cross. I'm your host of the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. Let's say thanks to our guests today, Jose Jimenez. I had Mary Despe, Marisol Maloney out, and Tracy Forche. So many of you have so many things to share, and I'm so honored to give you a platform to share your transition stories. Before you leave, wherever you are, if you're going through a transition, if you're thinking of going through a transition in the future and you're preparing, awesome. If you've been in the civilian workforce and are looking for more answers, or if you're just somebody who wants to give back, thanks for joining us. Remember, and I'll always say this at the end of the show, you are strong, you are brave, you are skilled, and you are trained. All of these things are needed in the civilian workforce. I believe in you. Until next time, we'll see you soon.
Post-production for this episode is done with care by oceantreecreative.com.